The Queen is seen to once again push herself in the middle of the media storm as her newest plan has involved the future heir of the throne.
I will not allow this crown to be seized by a betrayer. William's voice rang sharp and unyielding as the recording was placed upon the table. A hidden plot conceived beneath the palace's own dome by someone who lived under the same roof. There were no duels of blades, no bloodshed, only falsified documents and exchanged seals. Yet that alone was enough to wipe the rightful heir's name from the pages of history. Trapped between loyalty and treachery, standing opposite the woman he was compelled to address as his stepmother, he selected the most lethal course. Within the dark corridors of Westminster, he pursued every clue, every file, every concealed line of truth, resolved to uncover the one who had dared strike at the very heart of the crown. But just as the seemingly perfect plan approached its conclusion, an unexpected individual stepped forward, carrying evidence capable of destroying the treasonous plot and reclaiming the prince's honor. In that moment, the entire struggle for power collapsed. Will the truth, once revealed, preserve the throne, or will it instead trigger the fall of the dynasty itself? Well past midnight, a sacred stillness settled over Westminster Palace, disturbed only by the dim glow of oil lamps lining the corridor of the royal archives. This realm belonged to Arthur, the most senior steward in service, his hair pure white after 4 decades spent serving under 3 monarchs. Revered as a symbol of unwavering loyalty, Arthur protected the crown's secrets with the same ferocity he devoted to preserving its honor and continuity. That evening, as he secured the final lock of the archival vaults, he passed by the old guardroom, an area long abandoned, hidden away in a neglected corner of the palace. Yet a thin ribbon of amber light leaked from beneath its door, accompanied by hushed voices. Arthur halted instantly. One voice, though restrained, carried undeniable authority and sharpness: Queen Camilla. After years of careful ascent, she now stood at the summit beside King Charles III. Camilla was known for her cold logic and calculated thinking. Ascending the throne had not softened her ambition, particularly her determination to ensure the future of her own lineage. Arthur leaned closer to the heavy oak door. Camilla's voice grew more cutting, entwined with a deeper, disciplined tone. Sir Andrew Parker Bowles, her former husband. Though retired from the cavalry, Andrew still commanded an extensive network within aristocratic circles and the armed forces, exercising power far beyond the palace's walls. What they discussed was far from casual conversation. It was a deliberate and precisely engineered scheme. Arthur felt his blood run cold. Camilla was directing a campaign designed to undermine Prince William, the rightful heir. The strategy was clear: disrupt his public responsibilities, fabricate serious administrative failures, and thereby plant doubt within both the press and the Privy Council regarding his suitability to rule. Central to the plot was Tom Parker Bowles, Camilla's son with Andrew. A well-known food critic, Tom was to be strategically placed into key positions, most notably overseeing the Crown's major heritage funds, charitable institutions that had long operated under William's patronage and supervision. Arthur's frail body trembled, not from fear, but from blazing outrage. This was nothing short of treason, a strike aimed directly at the heart of the monarchy. With deliberate care, he withdrew the small digital recorder he habitually carried for urgent court instructions and switched it on. Moments later, when the murmured voices faded and the guardroom door quietly opened, Arthur vanished back into the shadows of the archives. He gripped the recorder tightly, now carrying a truth capable of shaking the palace to its core. Arthur did not hesitate. Breaking every rule of his position, he understood that this knowledge had to reach William, the sole person with both the authority and the resolve to confront it. Fate seemed to reward loyalty. Prince William, known for his composed intensity, was engaged in a late-night private meeting with his father, King Charles. Their relationship was marked by frankness on matters of state, particularly regarding the future and the responsibility to protect the institution. William was in the midst of proposing reforms to the Crown Estate's administration, insisting that transparency remain absolute. When Arthur knocked, his solemn expression and urgent gaze prompted Charles, who regarded the steward as a trusted confidant, to allow him entry. Arthur spoke without delay. He bowed deeply and set the recorder upon the polished mahogany desk. The room fell into complete silence. As the recording ended, the covert voices of Camilla and Andrew lingered, like lingering smoke. William's hands tightened into fists as disbelief crystallized into cold betrayal. King Charles III leaned back heavily, releasing a tired breath. The conspiracy threatened not only William's position, but also the fragile balance of his own early reign, forcing him to face a harsh reality about his queen. Yet both royal resolve and political instinct quickly reasserted control. "I will show nothing but unity. The world must never see division within this house," Charles stated quietly but firmly. Publicly, he would remain the image of a king who trusted his queen without question. William inclined his head, determination burning in his eyes. "I'll scrutinize every record, every fund, every appointment. We'll dismantle this with undeniable evidence before it can harm us." His gaze returned to the recorder. Camilla's voice had sparked a silent war within the palace, but William and Charles had chosen their response. A hidden counteroffensive, guided by truth and absolute secrecy, to protect the throne. In the days that followed the secret midnight meeting in the king's study, Westminster Palace projected an image of perfect calm. Yet beneath that polished exterior, a haze of strain and watchfulness filled every hallway. William and King Charles displayed impeccable royal unity in public, but behind ceremonial smiles lay sharpened awareness and a carefully contained defensive posture. Queen Camilla, completely unaware of the incriminating recording, initiated her first maneuver with total assurance. One routine morning, as she and King Charles reviewed the day's agenda, she casually introduced a proposal. With effortless confidence, she suggested appointing Tom Parker Bowles to a newly created position titled Interim Coordinator of Strategic Heritage Events. Her reasoning appeared beyond reproach. She cited a lack of experienced staff and emphasized the pressing need to modernize the Crown's approach to major fundraising efforts. She portrayed Tom, known publicly as a food critic and event planner, as the ideal external figure, someone capable of bringing innovation and vitality. The proposal was framed respectfully, offered as helpful advice rather than directive pressure, presented as a benefit to the institution. At the same time, Sir Andrew Parker Bowles, Camilla's former husband, set his own mechanisms in motion. Highly skilled in elite social maneuvering, Andrew reactivated long-standing aristocratic connections and corporate influence to engineer subtle but meaningful shifts. He quietly advocated for adjustments in Crown representation on the governing boards of prominent charities. The candidates put forward appeared reputable on the surface, yet many were quietly loyal to Andrew, or naturally inclined to challenge William's policies. The objective was never to remove William directly. Instead, the strategy focused on weakening his influence. By gradually sidelining him from critical fundraising responsibilities and ceremonial representation, Camilla aimed to cultivate an image, without stating it outright, of a prince lacking decisive leadership or the full confidence of influential benefactors. Within the palace bureaucracy, official documents began to circulate at an unusual pace. Prepared under the guise of addressing a staffing emergency and promoting internal restructuring, each paper advanced the formal elevation of Tom. Dense with legal terminology, the approvals required only the royal seal and the king's signature to become binding. King Charles, maintaining the image of a composed and impartial ruler, as agreed with William, received every submission with steady calm. Internally, however, his unease deepened. His years on the throne had taught him that coincidence rarely endured within the machinery of court politics. To create space for William's investigation, Charles imposed a precise requirement. He demanded full original dossier examinations for every proposed personnel adjustment, citing the necessity of preserving historical accuracy and ensuring complete transparency. This instruction effectively slowed the administrative process, leaving Camilla's supporters stalled and increasingly uneasy. During this same period, William advanced his quiet investigation, following even the most insignificant leads. The first substantial discovery came from the palace gate records, mundane lines of ink that suddenly revealed troubling implications. The vault containing the royal seals, an area restricted exclusively to the king and his private secretary, had been accessed repeatedly during late-night hours well beyond normal authorization. These entries did not appear in the primary guard logs, but emerged when William compared handwritten registers against electronic data. The individual listed as responsible was a junior administrative clerk, one with direct ties to Camilla's private secretary. The earliest signs of manipulation had surfaced. Charles recognized that his decision to delay had been prudent, and William now possessed enough evidence to penetrate the seemingly impeccable legal structure shielding the scheme. Westminster Palace continued to stand in regal splendor, but inside its walls, the struggle over the monarchy's future had intensified into an open, though still invisible, conflict. Prince William, supported by a carefully selected team of fiercely loyal aides and specialists in digital forensics, initiated an extensive review of the palace's internal records. The scale of the operation was immense and required near total discretion. Every request had to appear as part of the so-called routine audit that King Charles had publicly authorized. William was not merely the heir apparent. He pursued the investigation with relentless focus, stripping away layer after layer of buried digital evidence. The primary target was the electronic archive of Royal Trust board meetings from the previous 6 months. Within a short time, his analysts identified a precise pattern of manipulation. These records were not entirely falsified, but rather expertly assembled composites. The opening portions, mundane procedural notes, and courteous formalities were genuine, while the concluding sections, covering staff appointments and financial authorizations, had been freshly fabricated. All evidence converged on a single figure: Andrew Parker Bowles. Benefiting from Charles's deliberate delay, William gained access to system authorization logs. These showed that months earlier, Andrew had been granted entry under the harmless-sounding designation of Independent Heritage Consultant. That clearance opened the most sensitive directories. Once inside, he replaced authentic meeting minutes with altered versions, creating a documentary trail that appeared, at first glance, beyond dispute. Simultaneously, King Charles conducted his own confirmation process. He instructed his trusted private secretary, a court veteran with decades of experience, to compare official board records with the king's personal decision ledger. The secretary discovered an event that had never existed, an emergency ratification approving Tom Parker Bowles' appointment as Heritage Coordinator. No such meeting had ever taken place. The record was a complete fabrication designed to legitimize the appointment after the fact. Each fragment of proof, Andrew's access logs, the spliced meeting minutes, the fabricated session, revealed a plot engineered with unnerving precision. Its objective extended far beyond individual advancement. If uncovered publicly, it could splinter the line of succession and devastate public confidence in the monarchy's integrity. Had these forgeries been exposed, both the aristocracy and the public would have accepted that William had been removed through lawful means. The burden pressed heavily on William. Though he now held the necessary threads, the scale and sophistication of the operation made one fact unmistakable. This was no private family conflict, but a calculated attack on the institution itself. The deeper he investigated, the clearer Camilla's determination became. She had been willing to enlist her former husband to carry out the most covert aspects of the scheme. William recognized that the moment to respond had arrived. He possessed sufficient evidence to present to the Privy Council, even enough to reveal a carefully controlled portion of the truth. Yet a cold sense of unease tightened within him. The palace had grown unnervingly quiet, and Camilla was far too perceptive and experienced not to notice the king's prolonged hesitation in granting his signature. With grim certainty, William sensed that the Queen was already anticipating his move and preparing a far more dangerous counterattack. He began assembling a comprehensive dossier, printing every data point and securing the pages inside a locked strongbox. This document was his sole means of defense, and he could not afford even the slightest sign of preparation. Any visible action now would grant Camilla the opportunity she needed to unleash her final and most lethal maneuver. The hidden conflict had reached its peak. The prolonged and unnatural silence from King Charles, despite the steady stream of personnel proposals, signaled to Queen Camilla that her scheme had been uncovered. She understood that William would never remain passive while being methodically sidelined, and she suspected he had already obtained evidence of Andrew Parker Bowles' interference. With no remaining path of retreat, Camilla executed her endgame, a maneuver designed to serve as both armor and weapon, aimed directly at the honor of the throne itself. She personally selected 3 of the most influential royal counselors, figures whose legal authority and moral stature could sway the entire court, and discreetly sent each of them a confidential dossier. These documents were not fabricated. They were authentic financial records from years earlier, bearing King Charles's own signature and connected to private investment decisions. If distorted and leaked, they could trigger a devastating public scandal. The message was cold and unmistakable. Should Camilla be brought down, she would pull the king into a controversy capable of destroying public trust in his integrity. Simultaneously, acting under Camilla's direct command, a trusted administrative aide carried out a final act of digital manipulation. Project records were quietly altered, with internal memos and emails inserted to portray every stage of Tom Parker Bowles' appointment as having occurred by direct order of His Majesty. In an instant, William's investigation became a legal snare. If he exposed the forged minutes, Camilla would unleash the financial documents and point to the constructed paper trail, suggesting Charles himself had authorized Tom's promotion, casting William as a son publicly accusing his own father. In a single move, the prince's inquiry was neutralized. Charles soon received urgent reports that the royal counselors were beginning to question his transparency. To prevent open turmoil within the monarchy, the king had no choice but to suspend all formal investigations, at least temporarily, ensuring that no sensitive material reached the public domain. Both William and Charles felt the deep, numbing chill of a forced pause. Their own sense of honor had placed them in checkmate. Yet in contests of supreme power, even the smallest piece can alter the outcome. Tom Parker Bowles, the very figure Camilla had maneuvered to elevate, began to feel increasingly isolated. Tom was not a ruthless opportunist. He wanted acknowledgement that was deserved, not taken by manipulation. The unspoken tension within the palace, the guarded looks, and the realization that he was being used to harm both his half-brother and the king weighed heavily on him. He understood he was merely a pawn. The realization broke him. Acting on impulse, Tom made a dangerous decision. He secretly contacted William and arranged a clandestine meeting far from the palace's scrutiny. Inside the muted confines of a safe house, Tom's regret required no explanation. He simply handed William a small USB drive containing flawless copies of every document Camilla had secretly replicated. The untouched originals of the meeting minutes, the unaltered data files, and internal emails that fully exposed the conspiracy between Camilla and Andrew. Using the very access his mother had given him, Tom had reversed the entire game. William accepted the drive, shocked and suddenly unburdened. Tom's decision offered more than proof. It confirmed that not everyone within Camilla's inner circle was blinded by ambition. It was an ethical turning point William had never anticipated. The balance had shifted. He now possessed everything needed for a decisive and uncompromising response. No bargains, no coercion, no concessions. The final move now belonged to the heir. With the documents provided by Tom Parker Bowles now in his possession, William finally held every missing piece required to complete the picture. The phase of covert investigation had ended. What followed was the moment of disclosure and judgment. Inside his private study, William organized the evidence with meticulous precision. The case was unassailable and conclusive. Altered system records, confirmed after-hours access logs, misappropriated originals of royal seals, and, most incriminating of all, the untouched backups Tom had delivered, irrefutably proving intentional falsification. He secured the materials inside a solid leather briefcase. Any sense of triumph was absent. Only the weight of responsibility remained. He had opposed his stepmother, a woman he had spent years striving to honor and respect. Carrying the case to the king's apartments, he placed it directly into Charles's hands, accompanied by a single handwritten note. The truth must be judged by the king himself. It was both an act of respect toward royal authority and a quiet appeal for Charles to set aside personal ties and act solely as protector of the crown. King Charles accepted the briefcase, his expression rigid and unreadable. He spent the entire afternoon in solitude, scrutinizing every line, every signature, and cross-referencing the manipulated digital files with Tom's original records. The reality revealed itself, unyielding and complete. Every trail led unmistakably to Camilla's private office and the channels operated by Andrew Parker Bowles. The sophistication of the scheme left Charles both stunned and deeply shaken. Before issuing a final decision, King Charles convened an extraordinary session of the Privy Council, assembling legal authorities, senior nobles, and government ministers. They gathered in the Grand Council chamber, where the afternoon light filtered through tall windows, casting an atmosphere both imposing and isolated. By protocol, Camilla was present, yet she sat across from Charles as a subject under scrutiny rather than a partner. She appeared flawless and unnervingly calm. Camilla still believed she controlled the situation. In her mind, the financial leverage she held over Charles had forced a deadlock. Either both would be ruined, or both would remain silent. Prince William addressed the council with measured, icy composure, offering no accusations, only facts. He guided them step by step through the sequence of events. Arthur's recording, the forensic audit, Andrew's unauthorized system access, and finally Tom's unexpected delivery of the original files. It was a precise, methodical dissection of betrayal. Camilla's facade remained intact as she prepared to dismiss the revelations as conjecture and a personal vendetta. She inhaled to speak, but Charles interrupted her. He did not confront her outright. Instead, he signaled to his private secretary to present a new document, one never previously disclosed. A detailed contract between Sir Andrew Parker Bowles and a powerful foreign private donor. The agreement revealed that Tom's appointment was never simply an act of favoritism. It was profit-driven corruption. Andrew had promised the donor that, in exchange for a massive heritage contribution managed under Tom's authority, the donor would receive privileged commercial access to royal estates. The document constituted undeniable proof of personal enrichment and a blatant violation of Crown regulations. As the terms of the contract were read aloud, Camilla's composure finally fractured. She had anticipated every contingency except Charles uncovering her former husband's private financial dealings. The council sat in stunned silence, recognizing that this was not a domestic dispute, but a calculated abuse of power for profit. The game board lay in ruins. King Charles had fully reclaimed control. The next morning, the council chamber felt utterly transformed from the charged confrontation of the night before. The sharp tension that had once filled the room was gone, replaced by a deep, almost sacred stillness, the kind that descends upon a courtroom moments before judgment is delivered. King Charles III entered dressed in somber colors, the dark fabric of his suit absorbing the soft daylight streaming through the towering windows. His face showed clear signs of a night without rest, yet his bearing was firm, his posture unwavering, and his eyes steady with the quiet, immovable determination of a monarch who had measured every outcome. He seated himself upon the ancient chair of authority, its carved oak arms catching the faint morning glow, and faced the assembled Privy Council. Opposite him sat Queen Camilla, still dignified yet visibly diminished, a lone presence among the arc of advisors, peers, and ministers. For a long, suspended moment, Charles spoke no words. He simply looked at her. There was no flash of anger in his gaze, no dramatic display of wounded pride. Instead, what lingered was something far heavier, the sorrow of a husband who had once believed in shared purpose, and the grief of a sovereign now forced to confront the reality that the institution he revered had been wounded by the very woman who wore the crown beside him. Camilla returned his gaze with the composure she had honed over decades, though even her disciplined restraint could not fully conceal the bitterness in her eyes, or the dawning realization that the final reckoning had arrived. Only then did Charles draw a single sheet of vellum toward him, the royal seal already pressed into the wax below. When he spoke, his voice was low and measured, carrying warmth tempered by unyielding finality. It echoed through the vaulted chamber like the toll of a distant bell. He began with Sir Andrew Parker Bowles. The judgment was uncompromising. The former cavalry officer was permanently barred from every aspect of royal life. He would receive no invitations to palace events, hold no positions on charitable boards, and exert no influence within the Crown's extensive network of patronage. This was not merely a private banishment, but a public and irrevocable severance. Any contract, donation, or proposal linked to Andrew's name would be dismissed without consideration, as though his signature itself were tainted. The king's decree left no room for doubt. Even the faintest trace of Andrew's involvement would no longer be tolerated. Next came the ruling concerning Queen Camilla. She was stripped of all authority over palace staffing, appointments, and internal administration. Every channel of influence she had quietly accumulated over the years was cut away. She was required to withdraw from all prominent public roles within the Crown's charitable trusts, heritage foundations, and patronages. Her title as Queen Consort would remain intact, preserving the outward dignity of the monarchy, but in practical terms, her power within the institution had been removed entirely. The woman who once shaped decisions from behind the scenes would now stand solely as consort, no longer as strategist or architect. When addressing Tom Parker Bowles, the king's tone softened, though the decision remained resolute. Charles openly recognized Tom's courage and moral clarity in delivering the evidence that had brought the truth to light. Because of that act, Tom was spared punishment. He would retain a modest, politically neutral role within a minor, cultural, or curatorial department, where he could rebuild his name through effort and integrity alone. This was not a gift of redemption, but an opportunity to earn it. Tom would start anew from the lowest rung, free from his mother's ambitions, yet obligated to advance only through his own actions. Finally, the king turned his attention to the quiet figure whose loyalty had set the entire chain of events in motion. Stuart Arthur was knighted on the spot and elevated to a senior position overseeing palace security and archival integrity. His new role carried genuine authority, ensuring that the Crown's records and traditions would remain protected. In a single act, Charles transformed a lifelong servant into a living emblem, proof that fidelity, honesty, and moral courage would always find recognition and reward within the house he governed. When the king set the vellum aside, the chamber remained motionless for a brief moment longer. Then, one by one, the council members rose and departed in silence. Camilla did not follow. She remained seated long after the last advisor had left, a solitary figure beneath the cold, slanting light pouring through the great windows. Eventually she stood and walked slowly toward the glass, gazing out over the palace gardens. She had constructed a labyrinthine strategy, anticipating every maneuver and counter from both William and Charles. Yet within her precise calculations, she had failed to account for the one factor beyond her control, her own son's conscience. She had designed the board and moved the pieces at will, only to be undone by a single pawn who chose truth over inheritance. Her downfall was not born of intellectual failure, but of a misjudgment, an underestimation of the quiet, immovable force of decency and loyalty. Prince William left the chamber without looking back. He stepped into the outer courtyard, where the morning wind snapped fiercely at the banners. Tilting his head upward, he followed the royal standard as it whipped against the sky. A deep and steady peace settled within him, not the fragile calm of triumph, but the solid reassurance of foundations restored. The throne had not endured through intrigue or raw power. It stood because truth had been uncovered, justice had been delivered, and loyalty had been honored where it belonged. The path to succession might still wind through storms, but its base now rested firmly upon unassailable integrity. After completing the story, what is your impression of Prince William? Do you believe his conduct in bringing the truth forward and seeing justice done was fair, resolute, and worthy of a future leader of the institution? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.